The global order as we know it has just collapsed, and the media is completely silent about the true magnitude of what just happened. Moments ago, a seismic fracture shattered the Transatlantic alliance. Mark Carney, a man who has controlled the levers of the Bank of England, the Bank of Canada, and vast networks of global capital, has just declared an unprecedented rupture with the United States. He is not just walking away from Washington. He is actively building an ironclad anti-Trump alliance that stretches across continents. Washington has been utterly humiliated on the world stage, completely blindsided by a financial and political maneuver they never saw coming. This is not just another political disagreement or a temporary diplomatic spat. This is the deliberate detonation of the post-war economic architecture that has kept the United States at the center of the global universe. The truth they are hiding from you is that this rupture has been planned for months in the shadows of Davos, Brussels, and London. Carney has weaponized the global financial system against the current administration, effectively drawing a line in the sand that forces allied nations to choose between American hegemony and a new globalist financial coalition. If you think this is just high-level political theater that will not affect you, you are dangerously mistaken. What Carney just initiated will dictate the value of your currency, the security of your savings, and the survival of the global supply chain over the next decade. We are witnessing the end of an empire's undisputed financial reign. To understand the sheer gravity of Carney's declaration, you have to look beyond the immediate headlines. The mainstream press is framing this as a personality clash, a mere ideological rejection of the Trump administration's aggressive trade policies and America First rhetoric. But the data is clear, and the real story is far more insidious. This rupture is directly connected to three major, seemingly unrelated global events that are currently accelerating behind the scenes. First, we must examine the silent but aggressive expansion of the BRICS financial infrastructure over the past 12 months. While Washington was distracted by domestic political warfare, nations representing over half of the global population quietly finalized alternative settlement mechanisms that completely bypass the SWIFT system. Carney's move is not happening in a vacuum. It is a calculated Western parallel to the Eastern de-dollarization strategy. By pulling a coalition of progressive Western economies away from Washington, Carney is essentially validating the BRICS narrative that the United States is no longer a reliable anchor for global trade. Second, this anti-Trump alliance is intimately tied to the ongoing energy and critical mineral wars raging across the global South. Look at what has been happening in resource-rich nations across Africa and South America. We have seen a sudden coordinated wave of nationalization and export controls on lithium, cobalt, and rare earth elements necessary for the next generation of technology. Washington has been attempting to secure these supply chains through unilateral pressure and aggressive tariff threats. Carney's new coalition is stepping into these exact regions, offering lucrative, green finance-backed development deals that exclude the United States. They are cutting off America's access to the raw materials of the future under the guise of sustainable development and multilateral cooperation. Third, and perhaps most importantly, is the sudden acceleration of central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, across the European Union and the Commonwealth. For years, Carney has been the chief architect and vocal proponent of a digitized global financial network. The Trump administration has taken a hostile stance against CBDCs, viewing them as a threat to domestic sovereignty and personal privacy. This ideological divide has now become a hard, structural fracture. Carney's alliance is essentially a financial fortress built on the rails of a new interoperable digital currency framework that will seamlessly connect European, Canadian, and allied Asian markets. By actively freezing Washington out of this digital architecture, this coalition is ensuring that the United States dollar will face an existential liquidity crisis. When you connect these dots, the true picture emerges with terrifying clarity. This is not a spontaneous reaction to a political speech. This is a synchronized, multi-trillion-dollar execution of a contingency plan designed to isolate the American economy. They are strangling the dollar, rerouting the global energy grid, and locking the United States out of the next iteration of the digital financial system. Washington is bleeding leverage by the hour, and the architects of this new alliance are moving in for the kill. To grasp how this operation was executed, we must dissect the motives and strategies of the apex predators involved in this geopolitical chessboard. At the center of it all is Mark Carney. He is not acting merely as a politician, he is acting as the ultimate financial diplomat, representing the interests of a deeply entrenched global institutional elite. Carney's power does not derive from a voting public. It stems from his unparalleled connections within the Bank for International Settlements, the World Economic Forum, and the deepest pockets of global asset management. His motive is preservation. He recognizes that Trump's aggressive, unilateral trade architecture threatens to dismantle the borderless flow of capital that these institutions rely on. Carney is positioning himself as the savior of the multilateral order, a modern-day architect of a new Bretton Woods system that explicitly excludes the disruptive force of the current American administration. Then we have the European Union, operating as the quiet, heavy-lifting enforcer of this new alliance. Brussels has been chafing under Washington's demands for increased defense spending and forced economic decoupling from lucrative Eastern markets. The European technocracy views Trump's return and his ensuing policies as a direct threat to the European project itself. By aligning with Carney, the EU can camouflage its rebellion against the United States behind a polished Anglosphere leader. They are providing the legislative and regulatory muscle required to make this anti-Trump alliance formidable. European banks are already receiving quiet directives to stress test their portfolios against a complete breakdown of U.S. Treasury liquidity. On the other side of the battlefield is the Pentagon and the broader United States national security apparatus. They are in a state of absolute, unmitigated panic. The military-industrial complex relies entirely on the unchallenged supremacy of the U.S. dollar to fund its global footprint and enforce its sanctions. Washington is discovering that its traditional weapons of coercion, financial blacklisting, and trade embargoes are entirely useless against a coalition composed of its own former allies. The humiliation of Washington is absolute because they have been outmaneuvered using the very financial systems they built. Finally, we cannot ignore the role of the global banking cartels and mega asset managers holding trillions in sovereign debt. Firms like BlackRock and Vanguard are watching this rupture with calculated ambivalence. They are entirely agnostic to national allegiance. Their only loyalty is to yield. As Carney's alliance promises stabilized green bonds and a predictable regulatory environment, these institutional leviathans are quietly shifting capital away from volatile American markets. They are voting against Washington with their balance sheets. This strategic battle is not being fought with tanks or aircraft carriers. It is being fought via clearinghouses, regulatory frameworks, and algorithmic capital flight. The power players have calculated that the United States is deeply over-leveraged, socially fractured, and politically paralyzed. They are moving for the jugular. This changes everything about your financial future. The geopolitical maneuvers happening in Brussels, London, and Ottawa are about to crash directly into your daily life, and the impact will be devastating. When a global financial heavyweight like Mark Carney formally severs ties with the U.S. economic engine, the immediate casualty is the purchasing power of the American consumer. The anti-Trump alliance is explicitly designed to bypass the U.S. dollar in global trade settlements, particularly for energy and manufactured goods. As allied nations route their transactions through alternative currencies and digital settlement rails, global demand for the U.S. dollar will plummet. We are looking at a rapid, uncontrollable devaluation of your hard-earned money. Every single item you buy that is imported, from the electronics in your home to the fertilizer used to grow your food, is about to become exponentially more expensive. This is not the cyclical inflation we saw a few years ago. This is structural, imported inflation caused by a weaponized currency war. Furthermore, this alliance is going to strike a fatal blow to the American supply chain. Carney's coalition is actively creating a preferential trading bloc, a closed-loop system where European, Canadian, and allied Asian nations trade freely among themselves while slapping punitive, synchronized tariffs on American exports. They are boxing the United States out of the global market. American manufacturers already struggling with high domestic costs will find their goods uncompetitive overseas. We will see a brutal wave of corporate bankruptcies and mass layoffs in the heartland as export-reliant industries are suffocated. Then there is the catastrophic impact on the energy sector. Carney's alliance is heavily predicated on aggressive, centralized climate finance, and they are using this mandate to embargo American fossil fuel exports. They are instituting massive carbon border adjustment taxes specifically designed to penalize American liquid natural gas and oil. This means the U.S. energy sector will lose its biggest overseas customers overnight. As domestic energy companies bleed revenue, they will drastically cut production, leading to massive supply shocks and skyrocketing prices at the gas pump right here at home. You will pay for this rupture every time you fill your tank or heat your home. But the most terrifying economic fallout will hit your retirement accounts. For decades, the foundation of the American financial system has been the insatiable global demand for U.S. Treasury bonds. Foreign nations and allied central banks bought our debt, keeping interest rates low and the stock market booming. Carney's alliance signals the definitive end of that era. As this coalition dumps U.S. Treasuries to fund their own sovereign digital networks, bond yields will violently spike. This will crash the domestic housing market as mortgage rates become entirely unaffordable for the average citizen. It will also trigger a massive correction in the stock market, vaporizing the 401ks and pension funds of millions of hardworking Americans. The safety net is being pulled out from under you. The financial fortress that once protected the American middle class has been breached from the outside. The next 30 days will dictate the financial trajectory of the next decade, and the timeline is accelerating faster than anyone anticipated. Within the next 72 hours, expect a highly coordinated dump of U.S. dollar reserves by secondary central banks aligned with the Carney coalition. This initial shockwave will not crash the dollar entirely, but it will shatter its aura of invincibility, causing extreme volatility in the foreign exchange markets. By day 7, we will see the European Union officially draft the preliminary legal framework for the Strategic Financial Autonomy Act. This legislation will formally decouple European clearinghouses from reliance on Wall Street infrastructure, making the rupture legally binding. Simultaneously, watch for emergency meetings at the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England to harmonize their digital currency ledgers, openly testing massive cross-border transactions that exclude the Federal Reserve. As we approach the 14-day mark, the true panic will set in within Washington. The Trump administration will likely retaliate with unprecedented capital controls and severe executive orders, attempting to penalize American corporations that comply with the new coalition's mandates. This will backfire spectacularly. Instead of forcing compliance, it will trigger the largest corporate capital flight in modern history as multinational companies desperately try to offshore their assets to neutral jurisdictions. By day 21, the commodity markets will break. The price of gold and sovereign-grade Bitcoin will smash through all-time highs as institutional wealth desperately seeks a safe haven outside the U.S. banking system. We will see critical supply chain disruptions as shipping conglomerates begin demanding payment in euros or newly minted sovereign digital currencies rather than dollars. By the end of the 30-day window, the reality will be undeniable. The credit rating agencies will be forced to place United States sovereign debt on negative watch, citing the permanent loss of international reserve status and shrinking global demand. The stock market will experience a severe liquidity crunch, prompting emergency intervention by the Federal Reserve. But this time, printing more money will only accelerate the dollar's death spiral. The battle lines have been drawn and the clock is ticking. The era of unquestioned American financial dominance died the moment Mark Carney drew his line in the sand. What we are witnessing is a bloodless coup against the global economic order, orchestrated by elites who have decided that the United States is too volatile to lead the 21st century. Washington has been humiliated, outplayed by a sophisticated network of central bankers, technocrats, and former allies who have systematically dismantled the dollar's global monopoly. The true cost of this rupture will not be paid by politicians in Washington or billionaires in Davos. It will be paid by you. It will be paid through permanently higher inflation, decimated retirement accounts, and a standard of living that declines year after punishing year. The system has been weaponized, and the target is your financial independence. Now, I need to hear from you. Do you believe the United States can counter this globalist financial alliance, or is the collapse of the dollar's supremacy now mathematically inevitable? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and never stop searching for the outward truth.